That's Mark Wayne, the big attorney. This is book. It's just funny they use that.
My name is Christopher Gruner. I'm the General Secretary for the Boston 9/11 Truth Group and the Volunteer Coordinator for New England for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth Volunteers. It's my pleasure tonight to have all of you here this evening. We really appreciate your coming out and your interest in this subject. I particularly want to acknowledge, although not by name, there were so many people involved, those who put on this evening's program and who marketed it out in a variety of ways that reached each of you, and everyone who was involved in the Architects Boston Exposition over the past 3 days, where it's my understanding that several hundred architects and engineers signed a petition requesting a new investigation of the events of 9/11. So thank you everyone who had a part in that. Our program tonight is going to be, our program speaker is going to be Richard Gage, AIA, the founder and CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I've known Richard for about a decade, admired his work and appreciated him being the tip of the spear, so to speak, in presenting to the world the questions that we all have about how the buildings fell on 9/11/01. You're going to see in the film this evening a great deal of evidence that suggests that the formal narrative could not possibly be accurate. Richard is going to speak with you in a little bit more detail about that. Afterwards, we'll be asking for your support for the work of architects and engineers. If you're impressed by what you see in the film tonight, we hope you all give a hand with that. So without ado, Richard Gage.
Thanks, everybody. I'm really glad you're here. I've been to Boston now from California several times, and we keep wanting to reach more and more people. And so I have 3 questions for you, first of all, before we begin. And that is about the third tower that came down on 9/11, which I was unaware of, and maybe you were too, or are. How many of you are relatively unfamiliar with the third skyscraper that came down at the World Trade Center on 9/11? Relatively unfamiliar. If you put your hands way high in the air, I'll actually count you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And how many of you, well, this is very important. You're going to learn about this third skyscraper tonight, and I'm going to actually ask you 2 more questions which are important. How many of us have come into the room tonight? Here's the 3 questions. Agreeing with the official story, unsure, or may have already done your own research and came up with the conclusion that the towers were brought down by explosive demolition. First, the official story. Large jet planes hit the towers, explosion of jet fuel, weakening of the structural system, and a gravitational collapse down to the ground. No reason to believe otherwise. This is the official the cause of the collapses, according to our government and the media. And that's how you've arrived tonight. How many of us pretty much agreed with the official story? Oh my God, nobody? Please be honest with me. Not a soul. Maybe you're unsure. If you've heard a few things, you're here to check out this controversy. You're unsure. Go like this so I can count you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Unsure. 10. And how many of you came already agreeing with the evidence for explosive demolition? Oh my God. Why didn't you guys bring your friends? You don't have any friends. Oh dear. Oh my God. Well, we're going to have some resources for you tonight that will help you to get those friends back or lose some more. I'm not sure which way it might go. But I want to make sure that at least you're aware of what we have. Because as Chris mentioned, the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are quite helpful in providing credibility for the cause of discussing the truth about 9/11, what really happened. At least what 2,730 architects and engineers believe happened, which is very helpful to most people. having that body of credibility. How many architects are here tonight? 1, 2, 3. I'm counting myself, 3. How many engineers? We're great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many normal people? Okay, great, fantastic.
Why be normal?
Firefighters. Are there any firefighters here tonight? Not tonight. So it's my incredible pleasure, honor to have teamed up with Eric Lawyer of Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, who has assembled 200 firefighters calling for a new investigation of the destruction of all 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers on 9/11. And 3 or 4 years ago, now, he and I filmed this presentation, which is, I think, very powerful because he and I team up. He from the firefighters' perspective, myself from the architects and engineers' perspective. I'm an architect. And Eric and I go through 20 different myths that are commonly held or put forth by the government or put forth by the media about 9/11 in the process of giving you the scientific forensic evidence for the explosive demolition of the towers. Eric starts off with a bang saying, well, his personal story, why he got into this. We finally edited this presentation just a couple of months ago, and we're delighted to be on tour now. This is, I think, our 6th stop. We've been to Newark, New Brunswick, Woodstock, Torrington, Greenfield, Brattleboro, Worcester, Watertown tonight, and 4 more. Dover, Belfast in Maine, if you have friends up there, and Brunswick and Lebanon. Very exciting. And that's on our website, the details for this. Actually, it's on our Facebook page, but you can go to our website and get there. Our website is ae911truth.org. So without further ado, I want to start the film. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it challenges you. I hope it gives you the information you came here for. And if it doesn't, we'll have a Q&A afterward. And guess what? We're going to go out to dinner after that. Where are we heading?
The firehouse.
Nope. No, this is Gail.
Not your average Joe's.
Where's Gail? Gail knows where we're going. Oh, there's Gail. Where are we going, Gail? She's focusing on photography. What?
Not your average Joe.
Not your average Joe's. That's how they name stuff here in Boston. So if you can Google that, we'll actually get you an address before we end during the Q&A. But think about coming to dinner with us. When have you had the opportunity to ask a dozen conspiracy theories? No. A dozen people who are looking for the truth about 9/11.
Evidence theory.
What? What?
Evidence theory.
Evidence theorists. That sounds better already. Okay, enjoy the film. How do the lights work out?
My name is Michelle Weiss Little, sister of fallen hero, FDNY, firefighter David Martin Weiss.
Yeah, I'm born for firefighters.
It was off the site because this is of course part of a rescue and recovery operation. Once it was off the site, there was no real need for speed basically to get this steel just cut up into small pieces and shipped overseas for scrap.
The structural steel that would have been key to figuring out what happened to these buildings. What happened to that? Well, New York City accepted a plan 11 days after the attack to immediately start recycling the steel. Not even in the United States, where some of it might have gotten saved inadvertently. No, it was put on ships bound for India and China to be melted down.
We were concerned about that, and we understood early on that those are going to hold the keys to knowing exactly how the buildings came down. And unfortunately, we were not successful in getting the elected officials and the powers that be to do that. When it was all said and done, we only had a relatively very, very small portion of the steel from those buildings.
There's about 250 pieces of structural steel that we know of saved for analysis, but out of some 200,000 tons. It's hard to imagine how at a crime scene you can destroy evidence so quickly and thoroughly and get away with it.
Actually, after that, there were up to 400.
A videotape of the collapse itself. Describe that. Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building. It's amazing. Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by world-class dynamite to knock it down.
Dan never repeats these words again after 9/11. He's using his intuition to describe what he's seeing, which is what we should all be doing. In fact, most of us have never seen this building on mainstream television, even though it was the third worst structural failure in modern history. Let's take one more look. Smooth, symmetrical. The penthouse falls a second earlier, indicating core column damage. Well, I've been saying, did you hear that? Keep your eye on that building. It's coming down.
Keep your eye on that building. It's coming down. Building is about to blow up. Pull it back. All right, guys. Sorry.
We are looking back. There's a building about to blow up. Hopefully, debris coming down.
Lots of confusion out on the street about this building and what it's about to do. How do they know it's about to blow up? There's a few scattered fires in there. Kevin McPadden and others were moved back 6 blocks behind Building 7. He's a first responder, an Air Force medic. Let's listen to what he hears from the radio held by the Red Cross worker.
At the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1.
Do fires bring buildings down to countdowns?
Myth. The government looked for evidence of explosives.
One of the things I looked at when I first looked at, we had that. So this is, obviously, we see shattering the structure, small pulverized debris. 19.4.8.
To the 8th floor, I started walking to one side of the building. That side of the building was gone. The first explosion I heard when I was on the stairwell landing, when we made it down to the 6th floor. Then we made it back to the 8th floor, I heard some more explosions.
What's the sound?
Like a boom, like an explosion.
And more than one?
Yes. We started walking down the stairs, we made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. When we get outside, police officer comes to me and says, you have to run. We have more information of bombs, so you have to run.
He was the emergency coordinator for the New York Office of Emergency.
After the radio transmission from the Red Cross worker.
And then it was like another 2, 3 seconds. You heard explosions, like boom. And it's like a distinct sound. It's not like when the compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. To me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
And now this goes beyond.
I'm okay, all right? Here, look. You want to call your mother or something?
Now again, they say there's no explosions. You be the...
Getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway. There was a heavy-duty explosion.
The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the...
Yeah, definitely a secondary explosion.
I heard a second explosion and another rumble.
An hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower.
It just went boom, like a bomb went off. And another explosion came right from it, so everyone flying.
There were numerous secondary explosions taking place in that building. There were continuous explosions.
No, the first explosion, and there was a second explosion in the same building. There were 2 explosions.
Okay. Federal agencies that were down there do believe that there was some sort of explosive device somewhere else besides the planes hitting.
There was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
There was a secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or
report on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
Then there was those secondary explosions and then the subsequent collapses.
That the FBI most likely thinks that there was a car or truck packed with explosives underneath the buildings, which also exploded at the same time and brought both of them down.
Now that's the first time we're hearing that. So 2 planes and explosives that were in the building, is that correct?
That is the working theory at this point. That is...
It sounded like gunfire, you know, bang, 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 and then all of a sudden 3 big explosions.
About 50 consecutive bangs, and it fell down like a waterfall.
And we heard the noise associated with an implosion.
We heard a very loud blast, an explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse before us.
We heard a loud explosion, and at that point, Building 2 was collapsing.
At that point, we heard a large boom. I looked up and just saw the building coming at us.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse?
To me, it sounded like an explosion.
There was another major explosion. The building itself, literally the top of it came down.
All of a sudden you hear explosion, and you could see the building starting to collapse.
Huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
We understand now there has been a secondary explosion on Tower 2.
According to the Associated Press, another building that has either been attacked or exploded.
The tower, rather, that has collapsed, though we are told, collapsed because of a third explosion.
And about an hour later after that, there was a huge explosion at the base of the South Tower. That's the One World Trade Center, and part of the building collapsed.
We could hear a rumble, which was about 5 seconds long, preceding the actual collapse, and then a boom when each of those towers collapsed.
Just seconds ago, there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the Second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
I was about 5 blocks away when I heard explosions.
And then you heard from far away, boom, boom, and you heard the boom, 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 boom.
Floor by floor, instead of popping out.
It was as if they had detonated. As if they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
From the corner, boom, 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 boom. Just like 20 straight hits. And as the bombs were going, people just started running, and I sat there and watched a few of them explode, and it just started going pop. It just started going boom, 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 boom. And he goes, how fast? I go, like firecrackers.
Myth. The firefighters did not report explosions.
9/11 Commission too is the ceilings, the walls, the floors, and there's plants in here. Any fire I've been into that's consumed the entire, where you have a fireball come, we don't get fireballs, but when you have that type of thing happen, you're going to see some wilting of the plants, or probably they won't even be there anymore.
Pfeiffer was the first chief into the building.
So look at the damage. It's
right
not
away.
Uniform.
A guy from the Port Authority told him the damage was somewhere above the 78th floor.
Look at the ceiling, perfectly white, walls white, plants intact.
Obvious. Something had happened right there in the lobby.
Windows, irregular damage.
You just saw that all the windows.
All the plants. Now look at the
lobby looked like the plane hit the lobby.
Look at the elevator cars when they show them.
They'd figure out that flaming jet fuel had shot straight down the elevator shaft.
All of this damage was done already.
Elevator cars intact.
People was all over the place.
Elevator doors.
So you knew it was going to be worse.
Myth.
Hot, molten, running. The problem here is that these temperatures are twice the temperatures that normal office fires or jet fuel can even get to. Fire and this molten metal pouring out of this South Tower minutes before its collapse. NIST tells us that this is molten aluminum from the jet plane. But we know that molten aluminum in daylight conditions looks silvery. UC Berkeley documents the melting of girders. Office fires and jet fuel don't do this. Nor do they do this. From the 2 or 3 pieces of steel that were saved from World Trade Center 7 and the Twin Towers, they're documented as having intergranular melting, rapid oxidation, sulfidation, sulfur forming on this hot corrosion of the pile.
One of the more unusual artifacts to emerge from the rubble is this rock-like object that has come to be known as the meteorite.
It's this fused element of steel, molten steel and concrete and all of these things all fused by the heat. And architects, engineers, people who work with steel, welders have just never seen the level of destruction and the level of deformation of this material in our lives.
Up till 2,700 degrees. What could be capable of creating those temperatures? We'll be looking at a likely suspect.
Back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel. I know of absolutely nobody, no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it.
See molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry. Like lava.
Actually melted beams where it was molten steel that was being dug out.
Underground, it was still so hot that molten metal dripped down the sides of the wall.
And the cleanup was very difficult in the beginning. The steel was coming out red in certain areas from the first couple of weeks.
This fused element of steel, molten steel.
And they pulled off a big block of concrete, and there was like a little river of steel flowing.
What's going on here? Magnet, and he finds that not only do we have these previously molten iron spheres, but there's pulverized metal, like metal filings in there as well. Well, we know they're missing tens of thousands of file cabinets. We know we're missing metal decking. So what does he find in their chemical makeup? He finds that it's basically the same result as if you burn thermite in a controlled experiment, iron, aluminum, etc. Dr. Jones concludes, therefore, that this is significant evidence of aluminothermic reactions, whose original constituents in the unignited thermite must have been something leather. They're about 1/16 of an inch long, the largest ones. They're in every sampling, hundreds of them in each sampling. Why do they come up to the magnet? Because of the iron content. He does an analysis on them. Sure enough, confirms that it's very similar to thermite. So he takes a chip, slices it open, zooms in 50,000 times. What does he see? Extremely small particles of iron oxide powder and aluminum, 1,000 times smaller than the human hair. These are at the nano scale. They have no business being that small. They're highly engineered components, perfectly uniform. 40 nanometer crystalline rhomboidal shaped iron oxide particles and wafers of aluminum powder, 40 nanometers by 400 nanometers. Defense Department contracting laboratories. All of this work is documented very carefully in a 25-page peer-reviewed scientific paper from the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal. It is moving through scientific circles with quite a bit of controversy.
Here, 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 and here.
Well, NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, tells us 200 feet per second. These are explosive speeds, not air pressure. Let's say this is the open office space, right? 60 feet wide. The elevator hoistway is behind us over here to my right. The air is going to come rushing down the elevator shaft through the doors somehow, and then into this open space. It's going to equalize in pressure, and if it busts any windows out, it might bust them all. Not these highly focalized, pinpoint accurate, violent ejections that occur almost exactly at the midpoint with World Trade Center 7. An implosion, a classic implosion. That's happened before in history, a classic explosive implosion. Versus the incredible explosive event driving 9-ton perimeter wall units laterally at 60 miles an hour, instant speed out of the sides of the Twin Towers, landing well over 6 100 feet away.
Myth.
There's a pile about 2 stories high of perimeter wall units, core columns, other debris. You know, there were over 110 floors in this building, each of them an acre in size, probably 10, 20 stories high or even higher.
Myth.
Our left here is upward, outward, arching streamers, geometry of fireworks almost in its symmetry. Compare that to the Tongan Sea volcanic eruption and this known controlled demolition with pyroclastic-like flows. Is there any similarity? Is there enough similarity to warrant an investigation into the possible use of explosives? Replacing these elevator systems. They had 85 employees at the scene, and they were responsible for staying there and helping the firefighters rescue these victims. After all, this is traditional, and they are but expect that angular momentum to continue. It's 22 degrees off of its axis. We have asymmetrical damage from the airplanes, asymmetrical damage from the fires, and now asymmetrical loading from this portion that's tipping. But watch what happens from below. Complete symmetry, like the firemen described, like bands of explosions wrapping all the way around the building. How is it even possible?
Myth. The top block above the jet plane impacts drove the rest of the building down to the ground.
What's going on? We have explosions up at the top of the building, up here, and then it begins to go down. Now, we're going to look at this once more, and what you're going to see is that the point of jet plane impacts, which is occurring right here, there's no movement from here down until now. That upper 15-story section has destroyed itself in the first 4 seconds. Let's take a close-up look. We start, we stop. Like the firemen described, bands of explosions wrapping all the way around like a belt, not only on the lower floors here, but on the upper floors too. Start, stop, start, stop, start. It makes no sense, but look, sections. Look at these outward arching, horizontally directed streamers, almost like, again, the geometry of fireworks. Look down below. You'll see violent pinpoint ejections. And on this next run, I want you to look at the lower right corner of the destruction, where racing down the diagonal corner is a series of explosions racing almost as fast as the debris falling at free fall acceleration. This is about 2/3 of that acceleration. It makes no sense unless... I'm delighted to bring this film to you. It's the content in the film is we're just so proud of it. There are other films that we have made, particularly 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out. How many of you have seen this film? We've had it out for 2-3 years. This is the landmark film with 40 high-rise architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, controlled demolition experts in this documentary, all laying out the evidence for the explosive demolition of the 3 towers. A lot more detail, a lot more specific documentary evidence. Really, really well done. And it is available today. And by the way, tonight we've accumulated a lot of really good stuff. So it is all on sale tonight, 2 for 1. You buy anything, you can get something else like it for free. So please take advantage of that, because this is a $20 film, so that makes it $10, basically. And 9/11 Blueprint for Truth, 2-hour research edition, a lot more detail than you saw here, and that's me giving out the information. David Hooper was having marital problems as a result of his diving down the rabbit holes of 9/11, so he made a film to try to save his marriage. It worked. Anatomy of a Great Deception, really good film tonight. Once again, 2 for 1. I mean, you don't have to buy two of these. You can get any two for the price of one. And 9/11 Blueprint for Truth, a 10-minute, 30-minute, and 60-minute abridged version of the 2-hour version of 9/11 Blueprint for Truth, the 2-hour research edition. This is cut from this, so people with less attention spans that you run into can benefit from that. Tonight's film is also available here, and for those of you who want to just wear the t-shirt and get people to come up and say, what is this t-shirt about? Rethink911.org. The evidence might surprise you. Did you know a third tower fell on 9/11? So there's a lot of resources in the back. Kate, can you stand up and hold your hand high? It's all back on that table, and I want to encourage you to take advantage. Okay, Kate, I don't have any money. I really want that DVD right there. What are you going to say, Kate? She's being funny. That's why I like her. Now, I asked you 3 questions before. I'm going to ask you the same 3 questions. How many of us agree with the official story? How many of us are unsure? How many of us already, at this point, agree with the evidence for controlled demolition? First, the official story. How many of us pretty much agree with the official story? We didn't have any before. I hope we don't have any now. I may have turned you the wrong way. Unsure. You might still be unsure. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. 4. Unsure. 5. And how many of us think the towers were brought down by explosive demolition after seeing the film? Wow, a lot of the rest of you. So at this point, I would like to answer your question, and sir, you are first. Now, we actually do have the opportunity to have everybody hear your question. Hold it right into your face.
Sure, no problem. It's right in my face. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, I've been fascinated for many...
It's not coming out. It's not.
Is it off?
Whatever it is, it's not working.
It is not working, but guess what?
It's on.
This one might work. Testing, testing, testing. That's better. But that one. You only get so much distance with that.
Oh.
That work?
I'm not sure. Can you hear me back there?
Turn up the volume.
I don't have a volume on that one. I don't even know where.
I'll try to speak up.
Okay.
You know, for many years I've been fascinated with the expertise of those that can implode buildings. And I remember here in Watertown, when they were bringing the BF Goodrich down, in the building where the vulcanizers were, the supports there were so strong that they actually miscalculated. The stuff went up in the air and came back down in one piece. Anyways, I took advantage of the opportunity when they were taking down the Travelers building here in Boston. It was a 16-story building that was close to the Central Artery, and they took it down one Sunday morning. And it fascinated me. First of all the stuff was taken out of the building. Throughout the building, they placed explosives. And as I watched the first explosion go off, you would hear one explosion after another along with a flash. Multitudes of flashes, multitudes of explosions. And when I looked at these, and I've seen the same thing on television, I did not see what I saw in the Travelers building in these buildings. And as I looked at it, I said, gee, you know, it's coming down like a professional implosion, but I don't see the flashes as I did then, in the multitude of explosions. So when I first heard about pancake collapse, it sort of made sense to me. And again, I'm not an engineer or anything else. I'm only sort of applying little common sense to the situation. So it made sense to me. And that's what I believe. And I wish you could answer the question for me because, you know, I could go on and on. The 19 hijackers, several of them went to flight school and only wanted to learn how to fly a plane and not land it. So, you know, I don't think there's any question there with the hijackers. Now, in the event that our government was trying to implode the buildings, honestly, I cannot believe that they could put enough holes in it and put enough explosives without someone realizing it. So it sort of doesn't make sense to me. But I came in here with an open mind, and so I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, great question. Because in normal controlled demolitions, they use high energy explosives like C4 and RDX. But those have bright flashes and loud bangs. And that's quite a visual and audio signature that they might not want in a deceptive controlled demolition. So what did we end up with? Thermite, which has much lower audio signature. But we do have quite a bit of evidence, as you've seen, for thermite. And I hope that helps. And flashes of light are seen by dozens of the witnesses, first responders, who are on the audio recordings. And you don't see it, you didn't see those in this film, but the work by Graham McQueen on the Journal of 9/11studies.com in the article entitled 118 Witnesses of Explosions, a lot of those saw bright flashes at various floors. So this is really important evidence that we get with a visual signature that we do get some of with thermite. We do get some explosions from thermite, apparently, and because they heard them, but not the incredible loud bangs like we associate with normal controlled demolitions. Remember, this is a magic show. This is a grand illusion. We're asked to focus on the extremely bright, by the media, the extremely loud visual impact of the airplane explosions and associate that with the building's demise. But what happens is after that, an hour after that, when the buildings come down, that's when the evidence for the explosive demolition occurs. So they try to minimize that and the time distance, the time between the one event and the other, the planes and the buildings collapse. Hope that helps. Who's next? Yes. Now, Allie, want to try? Yes. Can you hand that to her?
Have you tried to, have you approached an audience at MIT, and if so, what do you get?
We've spoken at MIT at least once. I went and met with Noam Chomsky. How many of you know about Noam Chomsky? One of our greatest, I was going to say allies, but not really. He's done a lot of great work for the country. And Dave Schlesinger, raise your hand. Dave and I went down there. Dave got us an appointment with Noam. We took 72 peer-reviewed papers and put them on his desk. We got a picture of myself and him also. And Noam has been quite an opponent of the 9/11 truth movement. Some people are so smart that they're just, not able to be open-minded. How many of you have talked to people like this about 9/11 truth? We got some pretty rational evidence here, but Noam says, I don't want to talk about that. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an architect. Well, a 12-year-old can figure out that Building 7 is coming down with explosions, a fire. The few small scattered fires can't bring that building down. But many adults don't get it. PhDs don't get it. Brilliant people like Noam Chomsky don't get it. But we did speak. When did we speak at MIT and gave a full-on presentation? 2007. Correct. The year after I got started. Dave, you want to add anything else about Noam Chomsky?
I would. He actually made some interesting suggestions he's made to me before. He was my professor.
At MIT, where Dave graduated.
Yeah. He has proposed that you can't really expect the government to have an investigation, just like you can't have courts investigate the Vietnam War or the Iraq War. It's just too broad. He said that the precedent is the Russell Tribunal. Bertrand Russell had a tribunal that investigated the Vietnam War. And of course, the mantle of Russell would now be Noam himself, which I think most truthers would be horrified if Noam were to be in charge of any tribunal looking at 9/11. But anyway, that is a suggestion he has made before. And he also made something actually more useful. He suggested we go to the American Physical Society and the American Society of Civil Engineers and challenge them to to investigate it. Now, we actually attempted to get a booth at the American Society of Civil Engineers this year, and they wouldn't let us. So, but that, Richard has said that he will support my helping to pull together a more concerted effort among our civil engineers and our physicists to get into those places in the future. So I'm sure we'll be making announcements about that, but you can certainly talk to me about it. And I want to raise one other thing related to Noam. He has said, "Oh, don't go. I don't want to deal with. I can't deal with the science. Go to Science for the People or the Union of Concerned Scientists." And I actually have talked to the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they are very clear. They will not. No one will talk about things with me. They were very clear. No discussion. So I am looking to have a campaign against the Union of Concerned Scientists to have a even private dialogue. If there's anybody here who might be willing to help me, this would be outside of AE, would be able to just dialogue with me about efforts to appeal to the Union of Concerned Scientists right in Harvard Square. Please raise your hand so I can talk to you afterwards.
Many years ago, it's not on. But
It is.
It is
We
on.
can hear it.
Many years ago, I heard about thermite and thermate and free fall, and how that explains the molten, because it burns at between 3,000 and 4,000 degrees. But there's also all the cement, which didn't come out in chunks. It became completely on a microscopic level, which doesn't explain by explosions. Somebody has brought up the notion of going to Nikola Tesla, sort of a guy, interesting fella, and the use of also particle beam weapons or particle beams that can turn concrete to dust, just dust, which have nothing to do with the molten steel aspect, and that this might have been a more sophisticated operation. And does anybody know about this notion of how these particle beam things work? And because it was a pretty smart operation, as others are.
Thank you. There are several different theories out there about how the towers came down. One of them is directed energy weapons promoted by Judy Wood. And in that book, How Did the Towers Fall, she says very clearly that the evidence for explosions, which you saw amply documented here tonight, doesn't exist. There were no explosions. That the evidence for hot molten iron doesn't exist, but you saw several examples of that just tonight. And she says that the nanothermite, which you've seen lots of evidence for as well, didn't exist. So here's somebody who's actually provided no evidence for a theory that she posits, directed energy weapons, and yet denies the most fundamental basic scientific forensic evidence that we do have proof for. So I have reason to be suspicious. So that's not to say that there wasn't other technologies involved, but we don't have evidence for it. So I'm not going to be talking about it. The same for nuclear weapons, which has been posited as an alternative theory, mini nukes in the towers. The nukes that we know about provide extremely bright flashes, the brightness of the sun, which couldn't be hidden. Extremely loud bangs that couldn't be hidden. I mean, bangs that you'd hear throughout New York. And massive radiation, which we don't have. So what they say is, well, these are fourth generation mini nukes, and they've improved them a lot since then. Well, we don't have that on the body publicly available to discuss the science about. So we're not going to. And that's not to say that there might be any number of high-tech nuclear weapons or whatever that we don't even know about that were used. We can talk about what we have evidence for. This is what we can take to a court of law, which we're trying to get into, and making little progress of. But when we do, this is what we have the solid scientific evidence for. So I hope that helps. Yes, sir.
When Noam Chomsky says that he doesn't understand it, I don't believe what he says. I think he's a very intelligent human being. He's a professor emeritus at MIT. There's no reason why he couldn't understand it. There's another explanation why he and people like Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! Will not discuss it either. It's because they can't. They're under some sort of threat, blackmail, or whatever you want to call it, that prevents them from talking about it. In the case of Amy, I think it's the foundations would take her program off the air. And she probably figures, well, it's better that I'm on the air and talk about everything but that, rather than have my program off the air. What Chomsky is under pressure, I don't know. I mean, he obviously wouldn't talk about it. We may never find out. But I don't believe his
It's now
explanation that he can
8:30 and the
understand.
Watertown Library will be closing
Excellent
in 30
points.
minutes. Thank you.
So while we're answering the last few questions, I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to get on our mail.
It wasn't clear, the ACE elevator company, did they show up to work that day? It was unclear whether they assisted the firemen or not or something. It wasn't clear to me.
They did. Ace Elevator had 85 employees in the building at the time the towers were hit by the planes. They left without helping the firefighters. It was really quite a scandal documented in USA Today in October. So we want an investigation of Ace Elevator, which would have given, of course, immediate access to the core columns and beams right adjacent to those elevator shafts.
And John Gross, who was on there was he from NIST or something? John Gross, that he was lying about the thermite?
Yes.
He's true because the thermite didn't do it. The heat of the thermite did it.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
He said there's no pools of thermite, so he lied.
Yeah, but I mean, he's saying the thermite didn't do it, but it's the expression of the thermite could do it. Just
Okay.
a way of lying to himself in a way. But I'd like to know if people here believe the coercion that this gentleman mentioned. Can we do a raise of hands? Who believes that some of these people, like Amy Goodman and Chomsky, are intimidated to do it? Well, I think they are. Does everyone pretty much think they are?
Good, thank you. Next question.
Anybody? Question?
Come on up, and we can only get that so far. Can you stand up, please? Thank you. I'll take it. Take it.
You mentioned early in the documentary that there appears to be a line of individuals picking up the debris at the Pentagon. And I'm just curious where those photographs were published and if the people in the image were identified. Were those Pentagon employees? Do we know who they were?
Donald Rumsfeld was one of them. I think he's a Pentagon employee. Many others, of course, were out there, and I'm sure they can be identified. But those are photos that are publicly available, and they're not like conspiracy theorist photos or anything. Yes, sir.
My question, I don't need the mic.
Can you stand up, though, so people know where the voice is coming from?
Say, mic check.
Mic check.
Yes, thank you. Of which I was a veteran from 75 nights at Dewey Square in occupied Boston. So my question is, and we remember, I brought you to Harvard Square, remember?
I remember you.
Yes, okay. So my question is, after 8 years of organizing, with all of the presentations of the evidence that you and others in the group have made, the question is, are there 10 or 12 congressmen whose names you can share with us who have been identified as most likely to support legislation for a new investigation? Are there 10 of them? If not, are there 5 whose names, congresspeople, representatives, whose names you can share with us, who after 8 years of organizing, you've identified as most likely to support the call for legislation for...
None in office that I can think of.
Even one of them?
No. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Or to important people. But if you could get some graduate students on a project like this, some bright, they won't be as scared, they won't have as much to protect. It would have to be a sort of a covert, attractive. That was all my thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good points. Next question.
Supposedly it was an airplane that crashed into the Pentagon, but there was absolutely no wreckage. And those engines are titanium engines. They don't melt. I mean, they're big, and other parts of an airplane don't melt. There was no wreckage of any aircraft at all, inside or outside the building that I know of. I mean, I'm just...
Well, that's quite disputed. Can I turn your point into a general question about the Pentagon? Because AE 9/11 Truth doesn't cover the Pentagon for some very good reasons, which I'll tell you about. But all of us in the 9/11 Truth movement agree that nothing should have hit the Pentagon. It is the most highly defended building in the world. And it has surface-to-air missiles, and yet this plane, which is said to have come at the Pentagon, was flown by whom? Hani Hanjour, who failed Cessna flying school. Nevertheless, here's the Pentagon, here's the plane, and what does it do? Fly straight down into the vulnerable roof structure, which is the easiest target to hit? No, it flies around in a corkscrew, descending 3,000 feet per minute, 270-degree spiral, and ends up hitting what, we're told? Well, what is destroyed is the the Office of Naval Intelligence, which controlled the auditing department, with many civilians looking for the $2.3 trillion that Donald Rumsfeld had admitted was missing from the Pentagon budget the night before 9/11. So we certainly want an investigation of the Pentagon, which is withholding dozens and dozens and dozens of high-res videos which would show exactly what did or didn't hit the Pentagon. Right here. Could you stand up and face the audience?
So the fact that whoever did it, understood the psychology of our society. There are 5 people, I respect them, but I mean, after seeing this, if you can't believe it, it's just emotionally impossible for some of the population to accept it. A lot of my friends don't want to hear this. It's too disturbing. So like the 5 people here that saw it that said they still don't believe, that's part of what you're up against. And they knew, the people that did this right in front of our face, did it, know the psychology, whatever it is, of the unacceptance of this reality.
Pretty incredible, isn't it? And the media doesn't report this. Well, who owns the media? It turns out that Project Censored, a think tank in Sonoma State, finds that 95% of the media is controlled by just 6 corporations. Who owns those corporations? You say 5. It may very well be 5 now. Well, the same interlocking boards of directorates that control corporations in the arms industry, the oil industry, the banking industry, the insurance industry, all of whom profited enormously from the events of 9/11. So this investigation has to go well beyond the destruction of buildings, right? We're talking about people in very high places probably that are pulling the strings here. We don't have, of course, theories about that, but we're starting with what we can to hit people over the head with a 2x4, as we did during the last 3 days at the Boston Convention with 10,000 architects and 36 volunteers. How many of you volunteered over the last 3 days? Thank you guys so much. Incredible work that we did there, achieving 100 or more than 100 petitions, and waking up probably 1,000 architects we all talked to together collectively. Next question, right here.
You mentioned, again, going to the Pentagon, you mentioned the plane or whatever the object was coming down in a corkscrew. Is that more typical of a missile than
It's more
a plane?
typical of a fighter jet.
Fighter jet, okay.
If it was some kind of a plane, and there were people who saw planes, there are all kinds of witnesses. The Pentagon issue is full of misinformation, disinformation, lack of information. So that's why we have the 9/11 Truth movement fighting over what did or didn't happen there. But no. We're talking about something a plane would do, but a missile probably could, I suppose. I don't know.
So how do you know that these high-res videos exist showing whatever that object was? I mean, have you seen it, or have you spoken to someone?
No. I mean, this is the most highly defended building in the world with a lot of security. So we all assume that they have these cameras. And what?
Satellites.
Well, the satellites too. But the high-res videos from the nearby Citgo gas station and the hotel were confiscated by the FBI within 10 minutes after 9/11. They were on the job taking those. So those could be released. We know about those. In the back, any other questions? Okay, last question from Lenny.
How do you see the analogy, if you see any, between everything that is with obvious truth of what you said about the critique of the government version of this, and compared with precisely that which followed the execution of the Commander-in-Chief 38 years previous?
Anybody want to take that one on?
No, that's for you.
Well, I don't have an answer to it.
The analogy.
I can say something.
Let's
That's for Richard.
let's pick it up. I don't know about JFK.
There's a book out called, I don't have the actual name, Unprecedented. It's the reason why JFK died.
Unspeakable.
Unspeakable.
JFK and the Unspeakable, why he died, why
By
he
Jim
died.
Douglas, and he did 12 years of incredible research and, index that is about 80 pages. So I highly recommend the videos on Jim Douglas in that book, and the one that's coming out on RFK, and Malcolm X.
Actually, there's a brand new book just came out titled The Devil's Chessboard, subtitled Allen Dulles, the CIA and the Rise of America's Secret Government, which I think, without even having, barely begun, but from 100 links on the web to commentaries about this new book, October 13th it came out. The big publisher, HarperCollins, David Talbot is the author, who was the founder of Salon.com magazine, in San Francisco, by the way. And it traces the history of Allen Dulles relative to the absorption of 800 German Nazi intelligence officers into the founding from the inception of the CIA under a guy's supervision by the name of Reinhard Gehlen, whose 800 subordinates were called the Gehlen Org, or organization, and that even predated and yet implicates the perpetrators behind the coup d'etat, which actually predated 9/11 by 38 years. 9/11 was not a coup d'etat.
Great job.
It was already the seizure of state power happened in Dallas 38 years previous.
Well, Douglas is good, and I've read him.